They never met, but their ideas speak to the same question. How do you build influence that lasts? This video isn't about who was right. It's about what each understood, what they missed, and what we can still learn from both. At first glance, Rockefeller and Machiavelli couldn't be more different. One ran an oil empire from a quiet office in Cleveland. The other advised princes facing assassination in Renaissance Italy. But look closer, and you'll see they were solving the same problem. How do you get people to follow you when trust is fragile and the stakes are high? Let's put their models side by side. Let's look at the core differences, not just in style, but in substance. Start with human nature. Machiavelli believed you couldn't trust it. People, he said, are fickle, selfish, and opportunistic. So control had to come from the top. Rockefeller didn't see it that way. He believed people could be trained, disciplined. Given the right structure, even average workers could do extraordinary things. Then there's how they held control. Machiavelli believed in fear, in tight, top-down leadership. You give orders. You watch your back. You stay unpredictable. Rockefeller believed in systems. He delegated authority, created routines, and scaled control through design, not dominance. What about legacy? Machiavelli's kind of power needed constant maintenance. You had to keep performing, keep threatening, keep managing appearances. Rockefeller's model, by contrast, could function without him. His structures, the ledgers, the rules, the incentives, kept operating long after he stepped away. What of conflict? Machiavelli said, use it. If you see a threat, strike first. Crush your enemies before they rise. Rockefeller said, avoid it. Conflict was inefficient. It slowed growth. Better to cooperate, absorb, or outcompete quietly. And loyalty, Machiavelli saw it as something you bought or forced. Rockefeller saw it as something you earned, slowly, through decades of trust and reliability. Even their relationship with truth was different. To Machiavelli, truth was flexible, a tool, not a virtue. Say what you must to survive. To Rockefeller, truth was data. It lived in his ledgers. If something couldn't be tracked, it couldn't be trusted. In the end, Machiavelli built for survival. Rockefeller built for scale. Machiavelli focused on how to hold power once you have it. Rockefeller focused on how to design a system that doesn't need constant holding. One model is fast, adaptive, and built for unstable environments. The other is slow, methodical, and designed to outlast chaos. Both have strengths, but only one was built to scale beyond the individual. Rockefeller didn't just build wealth. He built trust systems, compliance mechanisms, financial buffers, and operational leverage. In other words, where Machiavelli relied on perception, Rockefeller relied on process. Where one demanded control, the other designed a world where control was no longer needed. Most ideas about power don't age well. What works in a palace rarely works in a boardroom. What protects a prince often collapses in a modern economy. But Rockefeller's approach, it still shows up in business schools, investor memos, even startup culture. Not because he was charismatic, but because he focused on the boring parts most people ignore. He wasn't trying to be impressive. He was trying to be reliable. Where Machiavelli told rulers to master appearances, Rockefeller focused on infrastructure, clean books, strong teams, aligned incentives, systems that didn't depend on constant interference. He believed that if you build well enough, people come to depend on you. That's why Standard Oil didn't just grow, it embedded itself in the economy. By the time the government broke it up, it wasn't just a company. It was a supply chain, a pricing model, a playbook for how to run a modern operation. And even in his personal life, he applied the same mindset. Think of your work as a mission, he told his son. Avoid debt, track everything, pay attention to detail, stay calm. That wasn't just advice. It was a worldview, one that said, don't dominate the moment, design something that outlasts it. In an age obsessed with speed, visibility, and scale, that mindset is more relevant than ever. Let's step back for a moment. It's easy to analyze ideas in the past, when everything's already happened. But the real test of a philosophy is this: would it still work today? Would Machiavelli's advice still hold in the world of surveillance capitalism, reputation scores, and 24/7 media? Would Rockefeller's quiet precision survive in a culture obsessed with speed and visibility? Start with Machiavelli. He built his playbook in a time of courtiers, assassins, and sudden coups. In that world, fear was currency, and manipulation was a survival skill. But today, fear doesn't hide well. One leaked email, one exposed tactic, and your reputation collapses overnight. Machiavellian behavior still exists. It's just harder to get away with. In fact, when we do see a modern leader who fits his model, calculating, coercive, image-obsessed, it often ends the same way. Rapid rise, violent fall. A flame that burns fast and consumes everything around it. Because in a hyper-transparent world, people are constantly watching and judging. Machiavelli saw people as pawns, but modern systems allow the pawns to speak, to tweet, to leak, to leave. So the old question, is it better to be feared than loved, gets replaced with a newer one. Is it better to be trusted than noticed? Now compare that to Rockefeller. He rarely spoke in public. He hated the spotlight. His moves were slow, deliberate, invisible until they were irreversible. He wasn't trying to control people's emotions. He was building systems that didn't require emotional control. And that's exactly what the modern world rewards. Operational depth, strategic patience, durable trust. Think about the leaders who last today, the ones who aren't just famous, but actually enduring. They're not the ones chasing headlines. They're the ones building quiet leverage, founders who obsess over user experience, investors who understand compound interest better than storytelling, operators who stay in the background but control the infrastructure. That's Rockefeller's playbook. It's not glamorous, it doesn't go viral, but it doesn't need to, because its power isn't based on perception, it's based on usefulness. And that's the key distinction. Machiavelli taught rulers how to manage risk in unstable environments. Rockefeller built systems that reduced risk altogether. Machiavelli taught leaders how to react. Rockefeller taught them how to build. So who would win today? It depends what game you're playing. If you're trying to win a media cycle or dominate a fragile coalition, Machiavelli still has lessons. But if you're trying to build something that survives scrutiny, complexity, and time, then Rockefeller's model, quiet, deliberate, systemized, starts to look less like old history and more like a modern blueprint. Let's make this real. Imagine two modern founders, both ambitious, both intelligent, but one reads The Prince at night, the other studies spreadsheets. The first learns how to shape perception, control narrative, and play zero-sum games. The second focuses on incentives, margins, delegation, and removing friction from the user experience. At first, the Machiavellian might rise faster. He knows how to get attention. He plays politics well. But as the company scales, problems multiply. People stop trusting him. Information stops flowing upward. Every decision bottlenecks through his ego. And worst of all, he becomes addicted to control. So nothing works without him. Meanwhile, the Rockefeller founder is boring by comparison. He rarely shows up in the news. He doesn't chase trends, but his systems improve every quarter. His team gets sharper. His culture compounds. That's the difference. Machiavelli's tools are designed for instability. They're defensive, reactive, short-term. Rockefeller's tools are designed for scale. They're process-driven, boring, long-term. Think about today's dominant platforms, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. They don't win by making people afraid. They win by building systems others rely on. Bezos, like Rockefeller, built his empire around customer obsession, operational excellence, and delayed gratification. Jobs, though charismatic, still understood. Infrastructure matters more than image in the long run. Even Satya Nadella turned around Microsoft not by making bold speeches, but by rebuilding culture and process from the inside out. These aren't Machiavellian figures. They're closer to industrial designers of power. They win by making themselves essential, not feared, and yet that doesn't mean Machiavelli is obsolete. If you're negotiating a peace deal, managing a political campaign, running a covert operation, there are moments when image, leverage, and controlled deception do matter. There are still unstable environments. There are still rooms where the game is zero-sum, but they're the exception, not the operating system. Rockefeller didn't need to dominate every interaction. He just needed to design the conditions where he didn't have to be there at all. And in a world where attention spans are short, but systems run 24/7, that kind of power, quiet, durable, invisible, is still one of the most dangerous kinds. You don't hear Rockefeller quotes trending on Twitter. There are no viral clips of him making bold declarations, and that's exactly the point. While Machiavelli's ideas thrive in conversation, Rockefeller's operate in silence. He wasn't interested in looking powerful. He was interested in being powerful, long after the room had forgotten his name. He understood something most people still don't. The more visible you are, the more vulnerable you become. Rockefeller didn't want followers. He wanted systems that didn't need him. So he delegated, documented, designed for resilience. While competitors were building empires with their faces on them, Rockefeller was building through proxies, secret ownership, quiet alliances, long-term contracts. He loved secret allies, one biographer noted. Some refiners who refused to sell to Standard Oil unknowingly sold to a local buyer who was already owned by Standard. That wasn't just cunning, it was strategy, because real power doesn't announce itself. It compounds quietly. Even his letters to his son were understated. No lectures, no threats, just principle, routine, and caution. Turn off the lights when not in use. Avoid debt. Do not waste. Let your work speak louder than your words, and it worked. While kings, politicians, and robber barons came and went, Rockefeller became the wealthiest man in modern history and faded from public view. Not because he was erased, but because the systems he built kept operating without him. That's legacy without visibility. It's not about being remembered. It's about building something that doesn't require remembrance to function. In a world obsessed with personal brands, social clout, and external recognition, Rockefeller's model feels alien, but it might just be the most durable kind of power left. Not the power to influence headlines, but the power to shape the conditions everyone else depends on. No strategy lasts forever. Even Rockefeller's. Yes, his systems were brilliant. His restraint was rare. His empire legendary, but he built it in a very specific environment. A slower world. A more opaque world. A world where control could be maintained quietly and for decades. That world is gone. Today, every system leaks. Every move gets documented. Every flaw becomes a tweet, a screenshot, or a public filing. Rockefeller's greatest advantage, invisibility, has become much harder to maintain. Back then, information was scarce. Now, it's abundant. Power used to be in what you controlled. Now, power often lies in what you can't afford to hide. In Rockefeller's time, you could operate through silent partnerships and off-the-books deals. Today, regulators, whistleblowers, and AI systems track everything, from shareholder structures to ESG compliance. Even the language of power has changed. The Rockefellers believed in control through ownership. Modern tech founders often scale through control through influence, through platforms, narratives, and ecosystems. Elon Musk, for example, exerts massive influence not by staying invisible, but by being hyper-visible. His unpredictability is part of his leverage. That doesn't mean it's better, but it does mean the environment has changed. Attention is now a form of capital. Trust is not assumed. It's earned in public, updated daily, and always one misstep away from collapse. So while Rockefeller's systems were designed to last 50 years, many leaders today are forced to rebuild their systems every 5. Pace has replaced patience. Transparency has replaced secrecy. And reputation, once a long-term private concern, is now managed in real time, in public view. The very thing that made Rockefeller powerful, his silence, might make him invisible in the wrong way today. Because today, people want to see the operator. They want a story, a face, a signal of accountability. And in a world of global scale and decentralization, a system that only works top-down, with rigid control, might not adapt fast enough. Rockefeller's model gave the world stability, but today we also need agility, which raises a new question. In a high-speed, high-visibility, high-friction world, what kind of power still works? And more importantly, what kind of power lasts? So what kind of power actually works today? Not full Machiavelli, not full Rockefeller. The most effective operators are building something new, something in between. They've learned to be visible enough to earn trust, but disciplined enough to keep control. Call it the hybrid power model. These leaders understand that in a noisy world, invisibility is risky, but so is overexposure. So they build in public through storytelling, transparency, and accountability. But they operate in private through systems, routines, and quiet leverage. It's not about being feared or being hidden. It's about knowing when to be seen and why. They show up when it matters, not constantly, but strategically. You see it in leaders like Patagonia's Yvon Chouinard, quiet for decades, then suddenly makes headlines by giving away the company to fight climate change. Or in Reid Hoffman, who built LinkedIn with steady systems, then emerged as a voice for responsible AI years later. They use Machiavelli's realism. They understand power dynamics, reputation, timing, but they pair it with Rockefeller's structure, measured decisions, durable systems, long games. They don't try to manipulate every moment. They try to design systems that make manipulation unnecessary, and when visibility does come, they treat it like a tool, not a crutch. Because they know something both Machiavelli and Rockefeller might have agreed on if they'd ever met. Real power isn't about being feared, and it's not about being hidden. It's about building something so well that the world eventually has to adjust to you. And this hybrid model doesn't just apply to companies. It applies to creators, investors, politicians, even individuals navigating complex systems. In a world where attention is fleeting and control is fragile, the future belongs to those who can move fluidly between signal and silence, who can blend clarity with restraint, conviction with humility, presence with process. The people who don't try to dominate the game, but quietly, patiently redesign it. Power used to be a question of control. Now it's a question of design. Machiavelli asked, how do you hold on to power when everyone is trying to take it from you? Rockefeller asked, how do you build something so useful it can't be ignored, even if no one sees your face? But today the question has changed again. The modern leader, whether in business, politics, or culture, has to ask, how do you build something so aligned with reality that it doesn't require force, performance, or even presence to sustain itself? It's not enough to be feared, not enough to be admired, and sometimes not even enough to be trusted. You have to be relevant. You have to be embedded. You have to matter, not just to your audience, but to the system itself. Because in the end, power doesn't always look like a crown. It looks like infrastructure, like the payment processor no one thinks about, but everyone depends on, like the supply chain, the protocol, the algorithm, quiet, boring, indispensable. Machiavelli gave us the art of political survival. Rockefeller gave us the science of organizational durability. But the leaders of today and tomorrow will need something else entirely, a way to blend presence with process, to earn attention without dependency, to operate without applause. Because in a world that's always changing, power isn't just what you hold, it's what holds up without you. Here's a Rockefeller quote to end this video. Success means nothing if you aren't worthy of it. So build the version of you who is, brick by brick, step by step. Here's the next video that I think you would benefit from watching and learn what greatness really means.